I've always believed that the bond between family members is unbreakable, but that assumption crumbled the day my mother and sister tried to sabotage my wedding. My name is Claire, and I grew up in a small, tightly knit community where everyone knew everything about one another. My sister, Emily, had always been the center of attention, favored by our mother for reasons I could never pinpoint. Perhaps it was her delicate features, or maybe her uncanny ability to charm people at will. Regardless of the reason, I spent most of my childhood in her shadow. When I first got engaged to my fiancé, Oliver, the joy I felt was immeasurable. I looked forward to a bright future with him. Yet, beneath that excitement, a quiet fear lingered in my heart, as if I sensed that my family would find a way to taint my happiness. I felt defenseless indeed. I met Oliver during a college lecture on Renaissance art. He was the only one in the room who seemed genuinely enthralled by the discussion. After class, he approached me to ask for my notes, and we discovered we shared a fascination with history. Over time, our casual study sessions turned into late-night walks through campus. He had a gentle spirit that softened my own guarded heart. Having grown up under my mother's rigid control, I found solace in the freedom he offered. It took 3 years of dating before he proposed, and I never doubted for a moment that I'd say yes. Oliver was the first person who made me believe love could be nurturing instead of oppressive. Though I worried my family might resist his warm nature, I also yearned for their acceptance, hoping they would see how much he truly cared for me. He was my refuge. I announced our engagement during a small dinner at my mother's house. She had cooked a lavish meal, clearly expecting some grand statement from Emily, who'd been boasting about a new job in the city. Instead, I took that moment to share my good news, thinking it would unite us. Emily's reaction was a polite smile that never reached her eyes, while my mother pursed her lips like I'd stolen something from them both. The tension in the air was suffocating. Oliver, sensing the discomfort, tried to lighten the mood by complimenting the food and offering to help with dishes. My mother brushed him aside, fixating on Emily's every move, as though waiting for a dramatic twist. Even though nothing explosive happened that night, I left with an uneasy feeling. Something about their reactions felt off, like they were plotting behind my back the moment I walked out. I worried. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I focused on choosing a venue, selecting flowers, and finalizing the guest list. Oliver and I had decided on a rustic barn setting, complete with string lights and wildflowers. It felt genuine, like us. Emily feigned enthusiasm, occasionally offering unsolicited advice about decor or dresses. She even recommended a baker who turned out to be fully booked. My mother remained oddly silent, seldom asking questions or showing any interest. Whenever I called to update her about the wedding plans, she diverted the conversation to Emily's new job or her supposed achievements. I tried to shrug it off, determined not to let their indifference spoil my excitement. Oliver assured me that we only needed our own happiness to make the day special. Still, the knot in my stomach grew tighter each time I spoke to them, as though bracing for an ambush. Always then came the rumor. It started innocently enough. A friend of Emily's asked if I had heard about her pregnancy. I nearly dropped my phone. Emily had never mentioned any boyfriend, let alone being pregnant. Confusion quickly morphed into suspicion, and I confronted her during a family lunch. She scoffed, brushing off the question as absurd. My mother, sitting next to her, wore a cryptic expression, neither confirming nor denying. I watched Emily press her palm protectively against her abdomen, as though the rumor were true. Yet she declared it false, claiming I had an overactive imagination. Her cryptic behavior was maddening, but I let the subject drop, hoping it was just gossip. Oliver was the only one who believed me when I said something felt deeply wrong. Emily had never been the type to let rumors spread without capitalizing on them, and that alone made me uneasy. Danger loomed. One afternoon, I got a frantic call from my aunt who lived in another state. She claimed she'd heard from my mother that Emily was pregnant and that Oliver was the father. I froze in disbelief. My mother had actually said those words, painting me as a clueless fiancé. Anger coursed through me like fire, but so did heartbreak. Why would my own mother spread such a malicious rumor? I confronted her immediately, dialing her number with trembling hands. She didn't pick up. Text after text went unanswered. Meanwhile, Emily simply sent me a single message. Meet me at the old park. The park was deserted when I arrived, just an abandoned place we used to play in as kids. Emily showed up late, wearing an enigmatic smirk. She wouldn't admit or deny anything outright, only saying that if she were pregnant, it wouldn't be any of my business. Infuriating. I returned home livid, tears blurring my vision. Oliver was waiting in the living room, his concern evident. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder as I told him every detail. The anger in his eyes reassured me that he was on my side. He vehemently denied ever sleeping with Emily, insisting that this was a twisted ploy to destroy our relationship. Despite my rage, I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. I believed him. We decided to confront my mother together, but she was dodging every call. Emily's cryptic behavior only fueled my suspicions. One day, Oliver found a series of anonymous messages in his email urging him to do the right thing and marry Emily. The lines between reality and this bizarre charade were blurring. I felt like I was living in a nightmare orchestrated by the two people who should have loved me most. Unforgivable. One evening, I decided to visit my mother unannounced. Oliver stayed behind, worried but supportive. When I arrived, her eyes flickered with surprise and something else, fear. She tried to dismiss me at the door, claiming she was busy, but I refused to leave. After a tense standoff, she let me in. We sat in the kitchen, the overhead light buzzing ominously. My mother's demeanor was unnervingly calm as she sipped her tea, refusing to look directly at me. Finally, she admitted that Emily had confided in her about a pregnancy, though the baby's father remained unclear. I demanded to know why she'd told our relatives that Oliver was responsible. She shrugged, saying that Emily had her reasons and that I shouldn't question my sister's truth. The indifference in her voice nearly broke me. She was my mother, yet she stood firmly on Emily's side no matter the repercussions. I trembled. Not long after that chilling confrontation, the wedding day began to loom. Invitations had gone out, and despite my instincts to cancel, I refused to let them destroy my happiness. Oliver and I spent our final week fine-tuning the details, from table linens to our vows. While hope still flickered, an undercurrent of dread enveloped me. Emily was silent except for cryptic social media posts that hinted at major life changes. My mother kept her distance, ignoring every phone call. I tried to stay strong, clinging to Oliver's unwavering support. He kept reminding me that our commitment to each other was what mattered. Yet, every night, I feared waking up to a new disaster. Part of me suspected they had a grand finale planned, some spectacle to shatter me on my most important day. Still, I pressed on, determined not to hand them the satisfaction of my defeat. I persevered. The morning of the wedding arrived drenched in sunlight, deceptively serene. My closest friend, Hannah, helped me into my gown while my mind raced. She knew about the rumors, the emotional torment. Quietly, she offered to stand guard if anything seemed suspicious. I felt buoyed by her loyalty. Oliver texted me from his end of the venue, reassuring me that he loved me. My heart ached, torn between excitement and dread. Guests began trickling in, some wearing forced smiles, others clearly on edge from the rumors. My aunt caught my eye, looking concerned. She whispered that my mother and Emily were nowhere in sight, which only heightened my anxiety. Part of me prayed they wouldn't come at all. Another part expected them to barge in with a shocking finale. My pulse pounded in my ears as I waited, poised for a moment that could redefine my entire life. Terror lingered. I stood at the altar, a swirl of white lace and trembling nerves. Oliver's gaze steadied me. The music started, and for a moment, I forgot my fears, focusing solely on the man I loved. Then, right before the officiant began speaking, a commotion erupted near the entrance. My mother stormed in, clutching Emily's arm. Emily's belly looked suspiciously rounded under a tight dress. Gasps ricocheted among the guests. My stomach turned to ice as they marched forward, ignoring the ushers. My mother glared at me with righteous fury and announced, for everyone to hear, that Emily was pregnant with Oliver's child and that I was stealing her sister's rightful fiancé. Stunned silence enveloped the barn, broken only by hushed whispers. I could scarcely breathe, my vision swimming. Oliver's hand tightened around mine, a silent vow that he would never betray me, even in the face of this madness. Unbelievable. For an agonizing heartbeat, I felt my world unravel. Then Oliver spoke with calm authority. He declared that Emily's accusations were a heinous lie, that he had never touched her. My mother hissed at him to stop spewing nonsense. Emily clutched her stomach theatrically, saying she was already 3 months pregnant. The officiant tried to restore order, but chaos reigned. Guests were stunned, some inching toward the door. I refused to yield my place at Oliver's side, fury surging through my veins. This was our wedding day, and they were desecrating it with their hateful spectacle. My vision narrowed on Emily's smug face. I demanded proof. If she was truly pregnant, she should have medical records. She stumbled, her confidence faltering for an instant. My mother scrambled to justify the lack of documents, claiming Emily had a private arrangement. The crowd murmured, uncertain whom to believe. I sensed their desperation. In that high-tension moment, Hannah emerged with a bold suggestion. A local clinic was just 30 minutes away. Why not drive there immediately for a test? The officiant, clearly trying to salvage the ceremony, seconded the idea. Emily's face blanched, her earlier arrogance evaporating. My mother barked at Hannah to mind her own business, but the crowd seized on this solution. If Emily was honest, a quick test could end the dispute. She refused outright, claiming she felt faint. My heart hammered. I saw an opening for truth, but also realized how far they would go to maintain their deception. Oliver squeezed my hand and nodded, urging me forward. I repeated Hannah's suggestion, adding that if Emily was indeed carrying his child, I'd step aside. A hush fell over the barn. I meant every word. My self-respect demanded proof, no matter how painful the outcome might be. Betrayal wouldn't stand. Suddenly, Emily collapsed, clutching her abdomen and wailing that she was losing the baby. The shriek that ripped from my mother's throat was unearthly, as though she believed her own performance. Several guests rushed forward while others stood back, horrified and confused. Oliver didn't move an inch toward Emily, his loyalty to me unwavering. My mother screamed for someone to call an ambulance, tears streaming dramatically down her cheeks. I stood frozen, torn between horror and suspicion. Hannah dialed emergency services, and paramedics arrived swiftly. They lifted Emily onto a stretcher, my mother trailing like a desperate shadow. I was left at the altar, guests scattered in shock. The ceremony was in shambles, but I couldn't abandon the question burning in my mind. Was she truly pregnant, or was this a staged collapse designed to avoid the truth test? I had to know, even if it ruined everything. I followed. I raced to the hospital moments after the ambulance, Oliver and Hannah by my side. My wedding dress felt like a cruel costume. When we arrived, my mother barred us from entering Emily's room, spitting venomous accusations of how we'd caused her miscarriage. Anger and grief tangled in my chest. I demanded to speak to a doctor, but the staff insisted only the patient's immediate family could receive updates. My mother wore that smug expression again, relishing her gatekeeper role. Oliver threatened legal action if we weren't informed. Eventually, a weary-looking doctor emerged, confirming that Emily had suffered no physical trauma and that there were no signs of a miscarriage in progress. Confusion rippled among us. The doctor added that Emily showed no indication of pregnancy at all. My mother's face went pale. The moment was surreal, like watching a carefully spun web dissolve under glaring truth, their lie exposed. Upon learning the test results, Emily turned hysterical, thrashing and screaming at the hospital staff. My mother demanded a second opinion, calling the doctor incompetent. Oliver and Hannah looked on as if watching a theater of the absurd. I felt numb, each revelation punching a new hole in my heart. Emily had lied about everything, orchestrated this spectacle on my wedding day. My mother had aided her, and for what? Jealousy, control, or some twisted sense of entitlement? My hands trembled at my sides as I approached Emily's bed. She threw a cup of water at me, shrieking that I'd stolen Oliver from her. Tears streamed down her face, but I saw no remorse in her eyes, only rage that her plot had failed. My mother tried to shield her, but I glared at them both, my voice icy. They had ruined my wedding. Now came my revenge. No mercy. I demanded they leave my life. Effective immediately, I wanted no contact. My mother gasped, calling me an ungrateful daughter. Emily sobbed that she had nobody else, but I refused to bend. Their betrayal was unforgivable, and I would not allow them to continue poisoning my future. Oliver stood by me, his eyes blazing with protective anger. As we left the hospital room, my mother hurled curses, proclaiming that I would regret this decision. I felt liberated, as though I'd severed a toxic cord that had strangled me my entire life. Outside, Hannah asked if I still intended to marry Oliver. I looked at him, and he nodded, unwavering. We decided we would hold a private ceremony the next day. free from the ghosts of my mother and sister. I clung to Oliver's arm, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and triumph coil inside my chest. No regrets, no surrender. The following afternoon, Oliver and I exchanged vows in a sunlit clearing behind Hannah's childhood home. Only a handful of friends attended, those who had stood by us. The air felt clean, devoid of the suffocating tension my family had brought. As I spoke my vows, a surge of emotion threatened to overwhelm me, but Oliver's steady gaze kept me grounded. Hannah handed me a bouquet she'd arranged herself, wild daisies and baby's breath. It was a testament to simple, genuine love, unsullied by manipulation. We sealed our marriage with a kiss, tears streaming down my cheeks. It wasn't the grand celebration I'd once envisioned, but it felt authentic, free from the corrosive interference of those who claimed to love me, yet sought to destroy my joy. The moment Oliver and I walked hand in hand, newly married, I felt the final chains of my past crumble away. I felt free. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in the life Oliver and I were building. I found a new job closer to home, and we spent our evenings cooking together or strolling through the neighborhood. Hannah remained a steadfast friend, reminding me that I'd made the right choice in cutting out toxic relatives. I blocked my mother and sister on every communication platform. Occasionally, guilt would gnaw at me. After all, they were my only blood relatives left. But then I'd recall the chaos they unleashed, their blatant disregard for my happiness. That clarity renewed my resolve. I learned that Emily was back at my mother's house, sulking in the aftermath of her humiliation. I felt no pity. She had tried to sabotage the one bright spot in my life. Unforgivable. I'd have gone mad if I allowed them any foothold in my world again. My choice stood firm. Late one evening, I heard a voicemail from my mother, left on the office line she'd somehow discovered. Her voice sounded pitiful, pleading for a reconciliation. She claimed she was ill, that she needed her daughter, that Emily was in trouble. I felt an old pang of weakness, the urge to care for my family. Then I remembered standing at the altar while they spewed their lies. I recalled the humiliating spectacle, the heartbreak, the anger that nearly destroyed me. My mother had weaponized my wedding day, and Emily had gleefully joined her. No, I wouldn't be reeled back in. With a shaking hand, I deleted her message. Oliver found me staring at the phone, tears in my eyes. He wrapped his arms around me, and I leaned into his warmth. Life was too short to waste on people who thrived on cruelty. I chose my own happiness, forever onward.